Welcome to The Deep Dive, your shortcut to being well-informed. Today we're diving into a term you hear almost everywhere, microplastics. But, when we talk about regulating them, it gets incredibly precise and, frankly, quite surprising.
It really does.
There's this new EU regulation that's fundamentally changing how products containing these tiny particles are made and sold. And it's way more nuanced than you might think.
Absolutely. It's not just a simple ban.
So our mission today is to really take a deep dive into this complex new regulation, Commission regulation, EU 2023-25,055. People often just call it the microplastics restriction.
Yep, that's the one.
We'll unpack what it actually defines as a microplastic, what products are now immediately off limits, what's surprisingly still allowed, at least for a little while.
Right. The exceptions and delays are key.
And how all this impacts businesses and ultimately you. Think of this as your essential guide to understanding the very specific and sometimes kind of counterintuitive details behind the headlines.
And it's timely, too.
Exactly. For context, this regulation is active right now. It began applying very recently, October 17th, 2023.
So things are already changing.
Okay, let's unpack this then. The first thing that really jumps out is that this rule, it doesn't cover all tiny plastic bits or even all polymers.
Not at all. It uses a very specific term, synthetic polymer microparticles, or SPM.
SPM. Yeah.
And this is crucial because it's not the broad term microplastics that most people might think of. It's much narrower.
So what exactly makes something an SPM in the eyes of this regulation? What are the criteria?
Okay, so for a solid polymer to be an SPM, it has to tick several boxes. First, it must be solid. That seems obvious, but it means liquid polymers are out.
Right. No liquid plastics here.
Second, it needs to be either synthetic or a natural polymer that has been chemically modified. So natural stuff like cellulose or natural rubber, if it hasn't been chemically messed with, is explicitly excluded.
Interesting. So natural rubber's fine. Chemically altered natural rubber might not be.
Potentially, yes. Third, it has to be organic, meaning it contains carbon atoms. Pretty standard for plastics.
Okay.
Fourth, and this is a big one, it must be not degradable when tested using specific methods in the REACH regulation, Appendix 15. Basically, it doesn't break down easily in the environment.
But not biodegradable, essentially.
Correct. And finally, it must be not soluble in water. The limit is 2 grams per liter or less, again, proven by specific tests in Appendix 16.
Wow, okay, that's a lot of specific chemical and physical properties.
Yeah.
So solid, synthetic or modified, organic, not degradable, and not soluble.
Exactly. That defines the polymer itself.
Got it. But then you mentioned it's not just the polymer, but how it's present in a particle. What does that mean?
Right. So beyond those core polymer traits, there are conditions about the particles they form or are part of. 2 main ways this works.
Okay.
Either the solid polymer must be contained within particles and make up at least 1% by weight of those particles.
1%. So a tiny bit isn't enough unless,
and this is the second condition, it builds a continuous surface coating on particles, and for coatings, there's no minimum concentration limit.
so a coating is treated differently.
Precisely. Think of it like this. You have a particle. If 3% of its weight is this specific type of polymer, it counts as SPM. If it's only 0.8%, it doesn't. But if that polymer forms a thin, continuous coating around the particle, even if it's only 0.5% of the total weight, it is considered an SPM because it's that surface layer that matters.
That makes sense. The coating is the bit interacting with the environment, potentially.
That seems to be the logic. And then there's size. Size really matters here.
Okay, how small are we talking?
At least 1% by weight of these particles themselves must meet certain size criteria. Either they need to be 5 millimeters or less in all dimensions.
5 millimeters. Okay, pretty small.
Or if they're fiber-like, long and thin with a length to diameter ratio over 3 millimeters, then their length must be 15 millimeters or less.
15 for fibers, 5 for other shapes. Got it.
And one more detail. If you have multiple types of these solid polymers in one particle, you add their weights together to see if they meet that 1% threshold within the particle.
Okay. So it's the total SPM load in the particle. So if I'm trying to picture this, would things like, say, raw plastic pellets like PET or PVC before they're made into something, or maybe those little styrofoam beads, would they be SPM on their own?
Yes, exactly. Uncompounded pellets, those kinds of beads, on their own, they'd fit the definition.
Right.
What's really, I think, fascinating here is how carefully they've defined the scope. It's clearly trying to avoid accidentally banning things that aren't the main problem, while really zeroing in on specific uses.
It's definitely not a simple all tiny plastics are bad rule then. It's very targeted.
Meticulously so. Aiming for impact without, completely disrupting everything unnecessarily.
And that careful definition is clearly just the beginning, because the next big question is, what does this definition actually ban from being placed on the market?
Right. So the core ban, it's in paragraph 1 of the regulation. It bans two main things, SPM on their own.
Like those pellets we just mentioned.
Exactly. And it bans SPM that are intentionally added to mixtures if they're present at 0.01% by weight or more.
0.01%. That's a tiny amount.
It is. But the key phrase here is intentionally added. And crucially, the SPM must be there to confer a sought-after characteristic.
So it has to be doing something specific in the product. It can't just be an accidental contaminant.
Precisely. It's about deliberate use. For example, adding SPM to a cream or detergent for texture, or to hold a fragrance, or add color.
Okay.
Or maybe using them as a binder or filler in a pill or as a lubricant. Sometimes they're added for bulk or to make something more elastic or resistant to shock or heat. It has to be doing a job.
So if some microplastic flakes off the inside of a bottle into the shampoo, that's not covered by this ban.
Correct. That would be considered unintentional SPM, maybe from wear and tear or packaging breakdown. Those aren't subject to this specific restriction. It's really focused on the ingredients list, so to speak.
Okay, that distinction is vital. Now, this is where it gets really impactful for consumers and maybe a bit surprising, especially if you were planning some arts and crafts. What products got hit immediately?
That's right. Some things had no grace period. As of October 17th, 2023, they were banned. The most talked about one is probably loose plastic glitter.
The stuff you buy in pots for crafts, or maybe for decorating.
Exactly. For arts and crafts, for toys, that's banned unless it meets criteria like being biodegradable, soluble, natural, or inorganic, but standard plastic glitter. Out.
Oh, okay. What else?
Also immediately banned, products containing microbeads. Now, microbeads are defined very specifically here as SPM used as an abrasive, basically, to scrub, polish, or clean. Think exfoliating face washes.
Right, those have been talked about for years.
They have, and now they're formally banned under this definition if they contain SPM. And the third category immediately banned was toys containing SPM, again, where the SPM were added intentionally for a specific function.
So for anyone planning a craft night or buying certain cosmetics, this regulation literally just changed their shopping list overnight.
Pretty much, for those specific items.
And you mentioned earlier, it's important to clarify that articles are generally outside the scope. So my sparkly t-shirt with glitter already glued on isn't banned.
Correct.
But the pot of loose glitter I might use to make that shirt is banned.
Exactly. The finished article with the glitter attached isn't the target. The loose SPM placed on the market is. That's a really crucial distinction.
Yeah, because for many listeners, it might seem odd that one is fine and the other isn't.
It does seem counterintuitive at first glance. And
Yeah.
it definitely raises the question of, how easily consumers can tell what's affected just by looking at something on the shelf.
Definitely. But as you said, it's not a total blanket ban. The regulation has some really important exceptions or derogations and these transitional periods. So who gets a pass and for how long?
You're right. That's the next layer of complexity. There are two main ways things are not immediately banned: permanent derogations and transitional periods.
Okay, let's start with the permanent ones. Who's off the hook completely?
Well, not necessarily completely off the hook, as they often have other obligations like providing instructions, but the ban itself doesn't apply in certain cases. A major one is use at industrial sites.
Meaning in factories?
Yeah, essentially. If SPM are used in manufacturing processes within an industrial setting, the ban doesn't apply. The rationale is that emissions are supposed to be better controlled there through other regulations.
But not my garden shed if I'm making crafts.
Generally, no. The guidance suggests small-scale craft production isn't usually considered an industrial site, so the factory making plastic components gets a pass on the use of SPM, but the hobbyist buying loose glitter doesn't.
Okay, that makes sense. Industrial sites have containment systems, presumably. What else gets a permanent pass on the ban?
A few categories of highly regulated products. Things like medicinal products for humans or animals, EU fertilizing products that carry the CE mark.
The ones meeting specific EU standards already.
Exactly. Also, food additives, in vitro diagnostic devices like lab testing kits, food itself, though not the additives, and animal feed. These areas often have their own detailed EU rules.
So they're basically handled elsewhere.
Largely, yes. Then there's a really critical category covering uses where the release of SPM during the final use is minimized. This is paragraph 5.
Minimized release. How does that work?
3 main ways. First, if the SPM are contained by technical means so they don't get out when the product is used as intended.
Like what?
Think of chromatography columns used in labs, printer toners, water filter cartridges. Also, somewhat surprisingly, things like diapers, incontinence pads, menstrual pads, even ink cartridges. The idea is the SPM stay inside.
Diapers. That's interesting because they contain those absorbent polymers.
They do. And that leads to the second way release is minimized. If the SPM are permanently modified during use, so they stop being SPM according to the definition.
How would that happen?
The classic example is those swellable polymers and diapers. They absorb liquid, swell up, and become much larger than the 5 millimeter size limit, and they stay that way. So they're no longer microparticles.
They change state.
Exactly. Or think about film-forming polymers. You find these in some paints, cosmetics, or detergents. When you use the product, the polymers coalesce and form a solid film. Once it's a film, it's not considered individual microparticles anymore.
Okay, so contained or they change form. What's the third way?
If the SPM become permanently incorporated into a solid matrix, basically they get locked inside something solid.
Like embedded.
Right. Think of SPM used as an additive in concrete or in many types of paint once they dry. Even granular rubber used for road building, if it gets properly incorporated into the asphalt or road surface matrix.
But probably not in face cream because you wash that off.
Generally, no. Cosmetic matrices are usually removed, so the SPM don't stay permanently incorporated. But something like glitter glue might qualify here if the glue hardens and permanently traps the glitter.
That's quite a detailed list of permanent exceptions.
It
It really shows they're trying to balance the environmental goals with, well, practical uses where the risk is deemed lower.
It's definitely a balancing act. A couple more quick points on permanent derogations. Scientific research and development using less than a ton per year is totally out of scope. Product and process R&D is usually covered under the industrial use derogation.
Makes sense.
And importantly, products that were already on the market before October 17th, 2023, provided they aren't subject to a specific transitional period, don't need to be recalled. They can be sold until stocks run out.
That avoids a lot of waste, which is good. Okay, so those are the permanent passes. Now for the transitional periods. These are the products that get a temporary reprieve, like a countdown clock.
Exactly. This is where different industries get different amounts of time to adapt, find alternatives, or reformulate.
Who gets how long?
Okay, here we go. Rinse off cosmetics with SPM, think shampoos or shower gels that might use them for texture or opacity they have until October 16th, 2027.
4 years from the start date.
Right. Then detergents, waxes, polishes, and air care products containing SPM get until October 17th, 2028. Same date for fertilizing products that don't have the CE mark but contain SPM.
5 years for those.
Okay. Next up, leave-on cosmetics, creams, lotions, etc., and also medical devices or their accessories covered by the specific EU Medical Device Regulation, EU 2017-745. If they contain SPM, the ban applies from October 16th, 2029.
6 years. And fragrances.
SPM encapsulated fragrances get the same deadline, October 16th, 2029. These are used to make scents last longer in various products.
Okay. What about pesticides or sports fields? I remember hearing about those.
Yep. Plant protection products like pesticides plus seeds treated with products containing SPM and biocidal products, they all have until October 17th, 2031.
8 years.
And the same date, October 17th, 2031, applies to granular infill for synthetic sport surfaces. This is the crumb rubber stuff used on artificial turf pitches.
It's a controversial one. But just for sports surfaces, you said, not kids' playgrounds.
The regulation specifies synthetic sport surfaces. Playgrounds might be different depending on the material and regulations.
Got it. 8 years for sports infill. Is that the longest?
Almost. The longest grace period goes to makeup, lip, and nail products containing SPM. They have until October 16th, 2035.
12 years. Wow. Why so long for makeup?
That's a good question. It likely reflects the complexity of reformulation, the sheer number of products, and maybe the perceived function of SPM in those specific applications like texture, wear time, or delivering color.
And there's something special about makeup during that long period, right? A label.
Yes, this is really interesting. For those makeup, lip, and nail products starting from October 17th, 2031, so for the last 4 years of their grace period until the ban finally kicks in 2035, they must carry a label that clearly states this product contains microplastics.
So consumers will explicitly be told even before the ban. That's a significant step.
It really is. It puts the information directly in the hands of the consumer during that final phase-out period.
Okay, so connecting this all together, these derogations and long phase-outs, they really highlight the EU trying to balance the environmental aim with giving industries, a realistic time frame to adapt and find alternatives.
Absolutely. It's a pragmatic approach, acknowledging the technical and economic challenges.
But even for the products that get a pass, permanently or temporarily, it's not like companies can just ignore this regulation, right?
Yeah.
What are they now required to do? This must be where the real work behind the scenes happens.
Oh, definitely. There are significant new obligations. First off, for many of those derogated products, there's a requirement to provide instructions for use and disposal, often shortened to IFUD.
IFUD.
Okay.
For which products?
It's mandatory for most of the derogated ones we discussed, those used at industrial sites, certain medical and food-related ones, and critically, those relying on the minimized release derogations. The ones where SPM are contained, permanently changed, or embedded.
So for things like diapers, printer, toner, maybe paints?
Exactly. The instructions have to be clear, easy to understand, legible, and permanent, either text or pictograms. They can be on the label, the packaging, in a leaflet, or even on the safety data sheet, the SDS.
What kind of instructions are we talking about?
Things designed to prevent release, like do not pour product down the drain, or dispose of in accordance with local regulations, or maybe do not rinse the container before disposal if rinsing could release SPM.
Practical stuff to guide the user or waste handler. Can they just put a QR code on the pack?
No, that's a key point. Electronic versions like QR codes or web links can supplement the information, but they cannot replace the physical instructions on the product, packaging, or leaflet.
Good to know. When do these IFUD requirements kick in?
For most products needing them, it started October 17th, 2025. For in vitro diagnostic devices, they have a bit longer, until October 17th, 2026.
Okay, so that's coming up soon for many companies. What else?
The second major obligation is reporting estimated emissions to ECHA, the European Chemicals Agency.
Reporting emissions. Who has to do that?
Two main groups. First, manufacturers and industrial downstream users who are using SPM under that industrial site derogation. Second, suppliers, so manufacturers, importers, downstream users who are placing other derogated products onto the market for the first time for professional users or the public.
So not the shop selling the product.
Correct. Distributors, retailers, and the final end users generally do not have to report. This is to avoid double counting and placing the burden too far down the chain.
That sounds like a potentially huge task for the companies that do have to report. Are there concerns about the admin load, especially for smaller businesses?
It's definitely a significant new requirement. And yes, the complexity and administrative burden are frequently discussed challenges, especially for smaller players.
What exactly do they need to report?
They need to provide a description of how the SPM are used, the sort of generic chemical identity of the polymers involved, and crucially, an estimated quantity of SPM released into the environment during the previous calendar year.
Estimated release. That sounds tricky to calculate.
It can be. And it has to include potential emissions during transport, too, like loading and unloading spills.
Why gather all this data? What's the point of the reporting?
The main goal is to monitor how effective the restriction and the instructions for use are. It helps ECHA and the Commission see if releases are actually going down, identify hotspots where releases are still high, and figure out if further measures might be needed. It's a feedback loop.
Okay, that makes sense. When is this reporting due?
It's an annual requirement due by May 31st each year, covering the previous calendar year's emissions. The very first reporting deadlines were in May 2026 for some industrial uses, reporting on 2025, and May 2027 for others, reporting on 2026.
So this reporting system is already up and running now.
Yes, companies are actively grappling with these reporting duties.
Is there anything else companies need to do?
One final obligation is providing information to competent authorities if requested. So if a national enforcement agency asks, companies need to be ready to provide the exact chemical identity and the specific function of the polymers in their products.
And prove their claims.
Exactly. Especially if they're claiming a polymer is degradable or soluble to avoid the SPM definition, they need proof from labs that follow good laboratory practice or GLP standards to ensure the data is reliable.
Wow. Okay. The sheer complexity of all these requirements, the definitions, the bans, the derogations, the IFUD, the reporting, it really underlines the massive challenge of trying to regulate these pervasive materials across the entire EU. It demands huge adaptation from industry.
It really does. It's one of the most complex restrictions under REACH, arguably.
And it makes you wonder, does this level of detail, while maybe necessary for enforcement, make it hard for everyday people like you and me to really grasp what's going on with the products we buy? Or even for the agencies to monitor compliance effectively across so many sectors?
That's a really important question, and it's definitely a balancing act regulators face. The technical detail is there for industry and enforcement, aiming for precision. But things like that future label on makeup, this product contains microplastics. That's the attempt to bridge the information gap directly to you, the consumer.
So let's recap. We've seen that this EU microplastics restriction is, well, way more nuanced than just a simple ban. It defines these very specific synthetic polymer microparticles, SPM.
Based on composition, degradability, solubility, and size.
Right. It sets immediate bans for things like loose craft glitter and exfoliating microbeads, but then it lays out this really detailed framework of exceptions, the derogations, and also long transitional periods for a huge range of products.
Everything from cosmetics and detergents to paints, industrial processes, and even road materials.
And this regulation, it's undoubtedly going to reshape supply chains. It's pushing companies towards innovation, looking for genuinely biodegradable alternatives, or just different ways to achieve the same product functions. It affects products you encounter every single day.
The impact will be widespread, even if it's phased in over years for some things.
So thinking about you, the listener, how will you start looking at product labels differently now? When that label appears on makeup saying this product contains microplastics, will you seek it out or actively avoid it? It gives you more information to make a choice.
It certainly empowers the consumer, at least for those specific product categories.
And maybe a final thought to leave you with. Consider the long-term ripple effect. This regulation is very precisely targeted at intentionally added microplastics. Could this focused approach indirectly spark broader changes? Could it push us towards better management of all plastic waste, eventually leading to a future where even the unintended release of microplastics from tire wear, from textiles, from breaking down litter becomes something we tackle much more effectively?
It definitely raises the bar and puts the issue firmly on the agenda. Whether the specific regulation is the catalyst for that broader change, well, that remains to be seen.